I just wanted to say out the camera.
Just want to say hi.
Okay.
I think this is the same thing I filled out yesterday.
It is. Did you list all those? See, this is the one that we print out for you because you're on record as being part of those committees and whatnot.
All these here?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what this is all for, and this would suffice. But if you didn't list that on your form yesterday,
If these here, just put.
that's the same thing as what you did yesterday.
Okay.
All right?
How do you like that new form, Augie?
Oh, I love it. Did you have anything to do with that?
No. It's interesting. You have to get an attorney.
I get all kinds of people asking me, do I have to fill this out?
What would be the title? County?
We are?
Yeah, it was another one of those rush through bills.
Thank you. Which is it, James? Bring those in? Yeah, I just tell them, look, I can't tell you how to fill that out. I agree, it's pretty
Russell, what'd you put for title?
basic.
County board member?
No, I didn't. I flipped it over.
For today. Okay.
Yeah.
County board member.
Yeah.
I'll get it out of your way so you know. You can
This is really all it is.
move them out of your way.
Thank you, Augie.
It's on the agenda.
For 9 o'clock?
Good night.
That's
Yeah.
what the rest of them are.
I'll stop it.
Rest of them are.
I believe that's how you did it
Okay.
yesterday.
We've got 2 minutes. Probably bomb.
Oh, I'll go check it out, don't worry.
Oh my gosh, what's taking?
Make sure you take the pliers and snip the red wire.
Well, if we're gonna go, I'm gonna go first, because I'm sitting there.
Might as well blow the crap all over me.
Oh, that was bad.
Each
How
one.
you doing?
Pretty good, you? Good. Hey, Russ.
Hey, how are you?
I don't know. I'll let you know.
I stapled mine. I had one of those black thing, like that, clip, had a clip on first.
Very good, you're not late.
Whenever you're ready, I'll
Kind of set me up too early.
Good morning, everyone. This is a public hearing this morning to hear comments on the proposed new ordinance on the county solar energy systems. And it's on the agenda for later on at our regular meeting. And we ask for comments. We ask that you try to restrict them to 5 minutes. I would like to turn it over to Lisa Ellis, and she will head up the public hearing. Lisa?
Yeah, good morning. I don't know whether you've all had an opportunity to read the ordinance draft, but this only applies to commercial facilities, not to those that are tied to your personal home or business. And those would be those whose primary purpose is for the wholesale sales of generated electricity. And in our definitions, we go through a little more about that on page 2 to define it. And in this document, when we're referring to these, we refer to them as solar energy systems, or SESs, which are a part of the larger solar project. And those definitions are on page 2. So the purpose is to assure the protection of health, safety, welfare, and property values to Edgar County residents and landowners, to avoid the adverse impact on important areas such as agricultural land, endangered species habitats, conservation land, and other sensitive lands, to assure that any development and product of solar generated electricity in Edgar County is safe and effective, to promote the supply of solar energy in support of the state of Illinois' statutory goal of increasing energy production from renewable energy resources, and to facilitate economic opportunities for local citizens. Now, as an unzoned county, we have no master plan, and the purpose of the ordinance is to provide the framework for enabling landowners to build, but with respect to non-participating landowners and homeowners. So this is not a philosophical conversation, but this is actually taking a look at the ordinance and how we can provide a framework for assuring that a landowner has the opportunity to build on their property, but with respect to surrounding landowners and property owners and homeowners. I'd like to start out, Dina, if you don't mind. I had asked Dina Hassler, our supervisor of assessments, to provide some information to us just for a comparison, because I did not know. And I really appreciate Dina's quick work, because I just asked her this yesterday, to give us some idea of the difference in tax revenue on a philosophical 100 acres of farm ground, what the revenue is when it is in grain production versus when it's part of a solar system.
And I will start with the fact that I don't have a lot of experience with solar. We have one tiny little solar field in Edgar County right now that's 3.5 acres. So with that being said, that 3.5 acres generates 0.54 megawatts. That's a nameplate capacity. That is what they can produce. I have no idea if that's what they actually produce, but they have to tell me what they are able to produce, nameplate capacity, and that's 0.54 megawatts. So in order to come up with 100 acres, the only thing I knew to do was assuming land acreage and megawatts are a ratio that would be comparable. 3.5 acres times 28.5 times is 100 acres. So I took megawatts times 28.5 times, went through all the process. You have to use a trending factor that's based on the consumer price index. You have to depreciate it specifically in a 25-year increment. All that being said, for 100 acres, my best guess would be a tax bill of $71,004 and some change, $71,400 for a 100-acre parcel total. I randomly chose some 100-acre tracts in Kansas Township simply because that's where solar's knocking on our door the closest. And tax on 100 acres ranged from about $4,200 down to $2,800, depending on soil types, your combination of taxing bodies, etc. So anywhere from $2,800 to $4,200 and some change for a 100-acre tract is tax bill versus my guess at $71,000 if 100 acres was in solar panels. And again, that's simply taking our 3.5 acres, 28 times and a half equals 100 acres, so taking the same 0.54 megawatts. I think that works relatively because I did speak with Matthew Long, who is Vermilion County's SA. He had a 20-acre field, and it provided, I think he said 3 megawatts. So I figured, well, our 3.5 acres times 6 is about 20 acres, so the same thing would work. The megawatts, 0.54 times 6 would be about 3. So I mean, I think it seems the acreage and the megawatt is relative. So
Okay, thank you.
Is that what you're looking for?
Yes.
Okay.
I greatly appreciate that. So that's how I wanted to open this up. So we're ready for public comment? Do we have any public comment?
I'll kick it off. Yeah, my name's Kirk Allen. Do you know if anybody within the state is trying to identify a statute for assessments like they do with solar or with wind?
There is one now.
There-
There is a
they have it?
statute for, yes, it's in the tax code for wind, or solar.
Okay. Was that something that they just recently did on the new energy bill?
2017 is when it was enacted.
Okay. Just a couple of thoughts in here. One on the setback, can you let us know where that 500 came from versus any other number shorter or further apart? I don't know how many have driven by the one that's in Ashmore, but depending on the direction and whether it's morning sun or evening sun, boy, it can be a doozy at certain times of the day. I think in your ordinance, you've got 500-foot setback from structure, is that correct?
It is.
Okay. Any reason we went with that versus, say, 250 or 750?
500, I researched quite a few ordinances in Illinois and Indiana. 500 was, and I cannot quote to you at the moment which one, there was only one that had a setback that was that far. And the rest of them were very minimal or not mentioned specifically.
The only other thing that jumped out at me, and this is one that might be a simple solution, but the coordination with local fire department and Edgar County Emergency Management says upon request by local fire department or ECEMA, the owner or operator shall cooperate with the agency to develop the agency's emergency response plan. When you say a local fire department, is that going to be only the fire department that has that in their district? Because we all do mutual aid, and it might be advantageous that enough equipment is centrally located, whether it be with ESDA, to where if we have something, we can pull from that instead of each individual fire department, having to say, hey, I need it. Because from a solar standpoint, their negative is going to be, well, I'm going to have to supply Kansas, I'm going to have to supply Christmas, I'm going to have to supply. If they can centrally locate everything that's going to be needed, because your chances of having multiple events at the same time are pretty slim, but to centralize that equipment need in one location would be a huge plus, I think, from a logistics standpoint, and it would lessen the burden, from the commercial standpoint of them having to supply that to the department. It's just a food for thought as an amendment to that. That's all I've got. Thank you.
I do want to share, I did not find fire protection and emergency management in any other ordinances. But I will tell you, I had a lengthy conversation over a year ago with somebody whose husband is in the commercial fire suppression business. And she's the one who brought it, because I have no idea how you fight a solar fire. But she said that it is foam, and which is what led me to be concerned. Now, if that is truthful or not, if there's another way, I don't know, but it made me realize we need a plan. And not only because maybe a solar field would have a fire, but the fire could, like we had here last year, the fire can start in the field, but it's going to affect it, especially if they haven't mown yet.
Right. Depending on the inverter systems they have, and the step-down transformers, if they're using hydrocarbons in those transformers, those require what's called a Class B foam. Class B foams are toxic. You've probably seen all the commercials now if you've been around AFFF foam. That is an issue because most agencies in our district don't carry Class B foam because we don't have petrochemical facilities to support it. Robinson's is the closest place that does. So the transformers would require foam, but all the rest of it, you're talking about electrical fire. And the last thing we're going to be doing is throwing water and foam on it. It's a whole different animal. And it's the same problems that we have with electric vehicles in those situations. It's a whole new game. And there is substantial equipment and training that needs to go into that.
To that end, Kurt, we're including it in the next hazardous mitigation plan.
Okay.
Okay, so that we can be available to, to put in for grants and coordinate and work with IEMA on it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I suspect most of their primary fire concerns are gonna be, like in Ashmore, you'll see all the trailers they have all over that farm. That's where all of their transformers and step-down transformers and converters are at. That's typically where you'd see a problem, unless it was a grass fire from, you know, whatever. But we definitely don't wanna put water on most of that. You bet.
Does Ashmore have any special equipment?
No, in fact, I was out of town, I think it was last week, the solar farm there got a hold of Clay and Ashmore, the chief there, and they did a walkthrough, kind of a, hey, here's the update. But my understanding from what I was told last night at our meeting, there's a whole lot of information that didn't get expressed from the corporate side. I wasn't there, so I can't say that was factual, but there's a lot of concerns that I'm familiar with from my background that, you know, didn't get shared with those guys. So it's definitely something that takes some expertise to walk in there and say, well, what about this, this, and this? We kind of dealt with some of that same stuff with the solar, or the wind stuff. You know, the wind people are gonna say, hey, we're gonna provide everything. Well, that's high angle rescue stuff, and nobody here has high angle rescue. I think Paris might have a couple of guys certified now, but, you know, that whole thing. What?
You?
I don't carry the certifications anymore. No, but it's one of those things where you really need to have a good plan, and you know, I think in your ordinance, they provide the emergency plan. That needs a plan that's bounced off of emergency personnel, that, you know, whether it be U of I's, Fire Service Institute, places of that nature that can really critique what they're telling you, because there's a whole lot more to some of this.
But they have a fire and a solar farm area. It's not gonna really bother too many people, right?
Correct.
So,
In this business, we have in my department and most departments, we risk little to save little, risk a lot to save a lot. If the risk is something that has no life hazard, no resident property hazard, there's very little we're gonna do other than surround it and try to contain it from moving. We're not gonna do a whole lot else other than that.
Any other comments?
Wasn't really intending to say anything today, but I do have a couple questions and comments. My name's Rita Rogers. So I do appreciate the time that's been put into this. I can tell that there has been a lot of time, and I want to just start off with saying I do appreciate some of the language, like the tile language. That's good. And the lighting, like those kind of things, I really appreciate that. On the aspect of this not being a philosophical issue, number 4 in purpose, to promote the supply of solar energy in the support of state of Illinois statutory goal of increasing energy production. If it's not philosophical, should we be in a position of promoting or deterring? You know, just adding that thought. You know, really the goal of any government should be protecting property rights from both, you know, twofold. Protecting the property rights of, you know, those involved who want to put solar on their property, and then also protecting the rights of those who, you know, are going to be living next to these. And then I just want to add on number 1, protecting property values. There's really no way to do that. You know, with a 500-foot setback, your property value is going to be tanked regardless. You know, I would not want to live next to a solar farm 500 feet, and I wouldn't buy a home next to one. So if there's a solar farm 500 feet from my house, nobody's going to buy it at the value it is worth. And then on number 3, safe and effective. Can we define that? I think that's a phrase, pairing, that's been thrown around a lot in the last 2 years, and nobody seems to define it. I will say that it's somewhat, safe might be somewhat defined in other standards, but effective, you know, what does effective mean? And then I guess the simultaneous use of areas for land for both solar and generation, or solar power generation and agricultural. That's not really possible. You can't simultaneously use the land. It's one or the other. So I think that's a fancy word thrown around by solar farm facility, you know, companies, whatever you want to call them, that's not actually a possibility. It's one or the other. And then just this is neither here nor there, but I just want to put it on the record that according to Forbes, 80% of solar panels right now are produced in China. Just so we know that. That's all.
Thank you.
Rita.
Oh, wait, one more question. Under D, under remedies, the $1,000 fine that would be assessed after, I think it was 60 days notification or something. Is that to the company?
Rita, what page is that on?
I think the second
Oh.
class.
10. So that's a daily fine,
For the, is that the owner of the land or the company?
the company.
Okay, and so I guess my question there is that enough to deter wrongdoing for these companies that are functioning with billions of dollars?
Excuse me, do you have handouts, those papers like she has?
I printed this off
Oh,
the
you
website.
printed that, okay,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's online.
okay,
There's a copy of it if you want to look at it.
all right, thank you.
Anybody else? Please? Hi.
I'm Janelle DeBlois, and I'm trustee for my family's farm. We have been approached by solar, and my biggest concern is, are there any ordinances made for cleanup if they, if they go broke, or, they said that there is a state statute that they have to, fund before they can start it. It's too new to know that if there's anything that's, any repercussions about the cleanup, and that's one of my biggest concerns.
The state standard she's referring to is this document that is for commercial solar. They did not have this available for wind, and to my knowledge, there still isn't. It's the Standard Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreement. There is a lot of meat to this document, which was somewhat reassuring. And it does also, that's where they were getting that information about decommissioning standards. And then we also put it into ours, but the most important thing is your contract as an individual landowner.
We
They
rec-
put it in there, but
We recommend, and I know I've talked to other individuals, that you retain counsel so that you
Sure.
can make sure that you explore all of your options.
sure.
And that your counsel perhaps is somebody that Illinois Farm Bureau would recommend, not just the person who does your regular estate work. Right.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks.
Yes, Kurt?
Just one other thing back on the fire issue. It says in here, in addition, at no cost to the local fire department, the owner or operator shall provide in the local fire department any and all specialized and necessary rescue or firefighting equipment. Who determines what is or is not the equipment? There may need a qualifier in that, because they could say, well, we don't think you need that. Could we put as determined by the fire department? Something that puts, here's what they say they need, then they have to provide it. Otherwise, the way it's written,
Is there a standard?
unfortunately, there's not at this point.
Well, I'm just asking.
Yeah, there's not at this point. The NFPA standards, I've not found anything that addresses this type of stuff.
I just didn't want to wind up in litigation over an issue for 4 years.
Well-
While we're trying to litigate whether, you know what I mean.
Right.
They have the resources to do that when we know it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, it says that may be necessary, and that's the open-ended, who determines what's necessary? So that may be necessary or as identified by the fire department. And then it's something that can be discussed. I don't think that would dive into litigation at that point, but I could see them saying, we had this situation with the petrochemical that moved out east of town when they were trying to put it in town. I think it's FS now, but I don't remember what it was before. But they were trying to put it in town, and the standards then, it's like, guys, we don't have any phone to take care of this kind of gasoline storage right there in our town. And they didn't want to supply any of that stuff. And fortunately, we got it moved out of residential area because we don't have any zoning, but this is a very similar thing. The fire department needs to be the one in control of saying, we need X, Y, Z, and here's why. If they can justify it, it shouldn't be an issue. And I can't imagine there's gonna be that much equipment, but there is gonna be some specialized equipment, much like your power line people carry on their rigs.
Lisa, can we handle that in permitting too, and shore this up later? I mean, not later, I mean, at any rate.
I think adding as identified by the department would clean that up.
And/or ESDA,
Or, yeah,
and/or, because
You-
that way
you bet.
ESDA could be using some state.
right. And I think ESDA probably ought to be the primary, that way they're not having to buy for every
That's what I
department.
was looking for, something that would be,
Okay.
if you go to one department, they want this, one department,
That's,
and that way ESDA can be the
Oh,
story. I like that.
yeah, I think that would be great, as long as there's someone who has the final say, they're the entity that has the final say, and it's not an open-ended negotiation between, the outlet.
Thanks, Kurt.
Okay, thank you.
Hi.
My name is Glenda Waller. I'm a landowner in Edgar County. I just simply want to state that I appreciate this being an educational, informative, and bringing us up to speed about all of this information. You've done a great job of getting information out to us, and I think I'm trying to figure out a way to get it submitted to other landowners. I'm just thinking right now of the Ukraine situation, that if we take a lot of our highly productive farm ground out of production, and there's like 40 million people right now, they're not going to be able to plant a crop this year. And we need all productive farm ground to be in production with crops rather than solar farms. But I feel, I really appreciate getting the information out there. You're evaluating things before we get caught flat-footed with the solar people coming in like the wind farm people did. So I just appreciate the information meeting. Thank you.
Very fine, thank you. Clyde, did you want to make a comment or anything? I mean, you don't have to, I just, we work together and.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you for considering having Farm Bureau be a part of getting this right and getting on the books. I know I've said it once and I'll say it again, there are other counties that are not in this position and are not as open to working with Farm Bureau and other entities, and we appreciate all of your help in letting us make this right to protect landowners' rights.
And I will share with you that after I got the first draft done, I sent it on, and Farm Bureau looked at it, gave me some excellent information and suggestions. And then after that, then I sent it to our new Assistant State's Attorney, Tim Gilbert, who really went through it with a fine-tooth comb. I thoroughly appreciate his input. And then I sent it back to Illinois Farm Bureau. So it has had a lot of eyes on it, but every conversation that I have brings up another point. And so, as we have said with the wind, this is not a stagnant document. It can always be a living document. We can always update it. This is our first stab, but the more detailed we get it in the beginning, the less likely we are for someone to come in and sneak something in on us that we didn't weren't aware of. I do want to add that just like with wind, there's a separate road agreement. If anyone is concerned about the impact on your roads, you do need to make sure that if you don't already have one, that you develop a relationship with your township road commissioner. The township road commissioner in that township or townships will have a close relationship with the Edgar County engineer, and they are the ones that will put together their road use agreement. The other thing is, whether or not it is an issue, I can't say, but there has been some concern about water quality. So if you are concerned that perhaps a solar or a wind farm would affect your water, then you need to get with the Edgar County Public Health Department, because they have the sample containers, and you need to get your water tested so that you have a baseline in case you are concerned about that in the future and you suspect there has been an issue. And that's really something that all of us should do anyway, is to find out our water quality and the safety of it.
I can't tell you. Yes, ma'am,
I do have one more question.
please.
It pertains to Dina. Do you have any idea about the values that this is going, is it going to lower the values years down the road? Because they do offer quite a bit in what they pay you for per acre versus farm rent in my part of the ground. We just have basically timber ground, so it isn't as good as what, other areas are. But if we were going to sell this in the future, would it impact the values, or do you know yet?
We wouldn't know until we had a chance to study sales, but I can tell you, we have seen normal sales of houses around these Ameren poles that they put in. We haven't really seen any effect on those in nearby properties. We're still paying prices that are comparable to other properties that aren't in poles, so
Our,
it's the kind of thing we'd have to watch.
our farm is pretty remote, so there aren't a lot of houses around it. But I thought it might be a good thing because of the income that it would generate. But I didn't know if you had any examples of it.
Because the only field we have here is out north here by Edgar Electric, or whatever it's called now. That's the only field we have.
Yeah.
And they got the houses on Blue Heron Road. We've seen, what few sales are happening in that area. There's been no change because of their solar.
And I couldn't quite hear what you said, but for 100 acres, you said on the tax bill it would be 2,800 to,
It's just 3 random fields, and depending on the combination of tax, the highest one, I think, for 100 acres, the tax bill was 4,200.
oh, 4,200.
Which is paid by the company, not by
Right,
the
it
landowner,
is.
right?
The taxes are, and that's something I thought I might mention too, it clearly says, if you say I have a 160 acre tract and they want to buy 40 of it, they're required by law to survey out specifically that tract, provide the survey to us so that we can separate the parcel. Because if they go bankrupt, they don't pay the taxes, you don't want your entire farm being in that litigation. So they must survey out what they're gonna use or any kind of easement roads they're gonna use. That has to be on a survey. That has to be lit by a licensed Illinois surveyor and has to be recorded and provided to us.
Again, back to the qualified, somebody has some experience as a lawyer, you need to get them involved.
Yeah, yeah. Because if they go bankrupt and aren't able to pay the taxes on it, then who does that revert to? The landowner then?
It's provided in the statute that the landowner, if he chooses, can pay the taxes to prevent it to going into tax sale. But it's like any other property, they don't pay the taxes and it goes unpaid, it goes through the process of a tax sale.
Gee.
So yeah, it's what Bill said, you need to have a good lawyer look over the lease.
Qualified.
What township do you live in? Or is your property?
Vermillion. I don't know, it's Elbridge County. I'm not
Okay,
sure what town.
so out east. I know several months ago, a guy down in Clark County, he owns ground in Sims Township and east of Oliver, and him and other people have been approached by people wanting to put a solar farm. So I'm just curious where they're starting to look at. So we obviously Kansas, and then Elbridge, and then Sims. So we've just got 3 areas that people are looking.
Just south of NAL too.
It's in the Elbridge area. I can't remember.
That's Elbridge Township.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, this has been a nice public hearing. I appreciate everybody's being here and contributions. I especially want to note that Lisa and her committee have been extremely thorough. The board has been patient and looked at all different aspects. Dina, as you can tell, our staff is very thorough, and we appreciate everybody's efforts. Thank you, Lisa. And this does end